During the Brexit referendum, how many times did we hear from the BBC, in spite of Brexit? Quoting myself is probably a sign of great vanity, but I said this on Question Time a few years ago. The BBC, how many times have we heard in spite of Brexit? In spite of Brexit, a record 3 million jobs have been created since 2010. In spite of Brexit, unemployment is its lowest level since 1975. In spite of Brexit, England defeated the West Indies at Lord's. I mean, it is... it is again and again. Well, borrowing from the BBC, although for slightly different reasons, in spite of Brexit, net immigration has been forecast to reach 675,000 this year. That's double the pre-Brexit record of 330,000 nearly a decade ago. As you may know, I'm a sceptic of forecasts, but in this instance, we don't need one. The evidence is clear. In the year to June 2022, net immigration to the United Kingdom was over 500,000, and this is with a Conservative government steering the ship. Ever since an unequivocal mandate for lower immigration in the 2016 referendum. It's also worth mentioning David Cameron promised in 2010 to bring immigration down from the hundreds of thousands to the tens of thousands, and this continued pledge is a key reason why Conservatives have maintained power for the past 13 years. And yet, this conclusively and repeatedly emphasised mandate is not being implemented. All-time record migration in spite of Brexit. We must remember that mass immigration is not inevitable. It is an historical aberration against our traditions that we will soon have to correct. We have a densely populated country. We're not building enough houses. It simply isn't possible to maintain such numbers. But I'm particularly pleased to be joined this evening by the founder of the think tank New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle. Peter.
Hello, Jacob.
675,000? That's pretty high when we promised into the tens of thousands.
Yes, it's just absurd. It's a terrible figure. I think that it will amount to, if it goes on like that, and why should we doubt that it will, it'll go on, it'll mean another 2 million people, over the next few years. That's a population that's already gone up by something like 8 million in the past 10 years. And I think really what it shows, Jacob, is a total and utter lack of will on the part, as you say, of the Conservative Party, but before that, Labour, to actually really address an issue, which is of most importance to most people.
In very simplistic terms, we had a target of 300,000 houses to be built.
Yeah.
With 675,000 net migration, that means we are short of houses, even if we'd built the 300,000 that we failed to build anyway.
Yes.
Actually, density slightly lower, higher with migrants than it is with people already here. But nonetheless, we're not building the houses, we don't have the infrastructure, it's just putting a strain on what is already there.
Well, exactly. All these questions that we talk about on programmes like this channel, housing, the NHS, all of these things, they all become meaningless if you do not talk about immigration at the same time. I mean, you've got the most extraordinary levels, as you pointed out, sort of unprecedented historically. This is not just migration. This, as you said, is mass migration. It's now been sort of confused, if you like, in the public discourse. You're either for it or you're against it. But in fact, there is migration, which we used to have until about 1997 of around 50,000 a year net. And now we're talking about 500,000 last year, 675,000 this year. This has got to be broken. That link between just migration, reasonable migration, and mass migration of a kind which will change the country irrevocably.
Well, and irrespective of the changes it may bring, it's simply not having the facilities here for the people to come, the doctor surgeries. I mean, we have a big announcement today on easing the pressure of doctor services. But if the population has gone up by 8 to 10 million in the last 10 years, well, of course, or 20 years, of course doctor services are being pressurised because there are more people who need the services.
Yes, of course. I mean, there are these economic problems, massive economic problems. I think that the basic problem here, though, Jacob, is that, people have been deceived. I'd say that over the past 3 years, they were told with Brexit that actually migration would be kept under control. That seems to have been changed by a sort of dissembling, I think, to actually, what we were actually going to do was just take back control. We were just going to control. But in fact, people voted for Brexit on the understanding that this kind of numbers would come down. And in fact, what has happened over the past 3 or 4 years is that all the entry requirements have actually been eased. And that seems to be being carried on by Sunak.
OK, but 2 points on that. One is we may be getting more accurate numbers now because, as you will know, it was expected there would be 2 million people who would apply for EU settled status, and it turned out being 6 million. So we hadn't been counting them in the first place. And so it may not be that much worse than it was before. And the second issue is how would we have done economically without the labour force that's been coming in? Who would have been working in our care homes and in our hospitals and building our roads and our houses?
We've got 5 million people on out-of-work benefits, Jacob. And the fact is that what has happened is that working-class people in this country have effectively been abandoned. What this is more or less saying, by looking at these figures and saying this is what actually we've got to come to accept as being the new normal, is there isn't going to be retraining, people aren't going to be paid properly. It's like we've abandoned that whole model and we're just simply going to keep bringing people in to do these jobs. So what that really means is that you've given up on your own population. I think that is one of the worst things that's happened politically in the past 3 decades.
Nobody in their right mind would ever give up on the people of North East Somerset. But thank you very much.